Hey everyone, it's Dr. Lynch, and this is the opening video for our class on languages, meaning, and global perspectives. And I'm here in Midtown Manhattan. Herald Square is just behind me, as you can see. And I'm walking down 32nd Street. And the reason I've chosen this location for this opening video is as follows. You see, this class is about language. And the trick with talking about languages, especially in school contexts, is the fact that we're all fluent in at least one language. So when it comes to thinking about, what's the role of language in learning or in schools, it's actually a pretty tricky conversation to get into. So I've come here as a way to try to start to demonstrate just some of the things that we'll be exploring this semester, what they're going to look and feel like. Now, I've chosen this street because when you walk from Herald Square eastbound on 32nd Street, what you'll start to notice, if you're kind of observing the storefronts behind me, is you'll start to notice that English language starts to fade, and we start to see Korean language emerge on more and more signs. For example, I'm even passing a bank here, and you'll see that behind me, you'll even notice that the sign to the bank is in Korean. If I was to flip the camera around and show you even more, in fact, maybe I can. Let me stop right over here and we'll do it. Let's see. No, it's not gonna let me. That's okay. Not a big deal. But my point being though is that in this kind of environment, right? As someone who's completely fluent in English, have written books in English, and in fact I'm in Manhattan and in the city that I was born and raised in. I find myself in an environment where my linguistic, kind of talents start to be, almost useless, right? I don't understand Korean. When I was in Korea in September, I was completely and totally out of my element. It wasn't, I couldn't communicate with people. I couldn't understand what the menus in restaurants said. It was just a fish out of water. That's not quite the same thing here, but it does drive home kind of one of the main things we have to think about in this course. And the main thing you have to think about in this course is this, is that for a lot of our students, a lot of the children that we teach in schools, for them, this is what starts to happen as they enter into school. Now, sometimes it's literally, meaning the languages with which they're comfortable are no longer useful to them. So it could be that they come to the United States from another country and they don't speak English. That's one scenario. But what I would also say is it also happens when kids who are, very comfortable speaking English, let's say, when they get into school and we start to speak academic English, which is a totally different beast. Does that make sense? Think back too on some of your own learning experiences. Do you recall the challenge of having to learn, how do I write this kind of academic paper? How do I, in this professor's class, if I'm writing a literary essay, how do I do that? What is it he expects to see? And how do I have to write for this kind of paper? All of that sort of thinking is actually, it cuts to the heart of why we have to step back and critically think about language and the role of language in learning. As we're becoming educators. One of the things too that I would encourage you to think about is what are the ways in which in your schools, in your classrooms, and most of you are teaching right now, what are some of the ways in which you see students who have linguistic talents that aren't necessarily being recognized in the school? Are there particular students who can have awesome conversations with each other, really inventive, creative conversations with each other when they're in the hallway, and then when it comes to being in a classroom, they actually they don't know what to say? See, one of the key things you're going to have to think about in this course is that we too often talk about language like it's some sort of just purely cognitive act, it's all happening up here in the mind, and in reality, that's just not true. In reality, when we talk about language and learning languages, you have to think about language as inherently social. Language, what it means to learn a language, what it means to communicate it, is what we're going to call, and with some of the videos you might see, we're going to call it a social construct, as much as it is a cognitive act. So it's both what's going on in the mind and the body, for sure. It's also, as you can see, it's also what's going on around us. And as the needs around us change, as the linguistic needs, the cultural needs around us changes, so does our relationship with language. All right? So I'm going to encourage you to think about those sorts of things. I also am going to encourage you to use this video, get the URL from YouTube that this video is on, and use this as a sample for the first video notes assignment, and claim your first 3 points for the course, or go for that. But use this as an example, as a practice run, and to see. And if it takes you a couple times to get it right, that's okay. All right, but I want you to take this video, grab the YouTube URL that's associated with it, put it into video notes in your Google Drive, and share it with me at prof.tomliamlynch@gmail.com when you're done. And let's use this as the first example of how you would take notes and use video notes in our course. All right? Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you online.